I left them there, feverish and trembling in the biting cold of that forgotten cabin, thinking I would finally be rid of that burden. The stepmother, with a cold smile, departed, ignoring the faint whimpers of the twin boys, abandoned to their fate deep in the forest. Little did she know that as the fever consumed their small strengths, eyes of an almost mystical white were already watching them in the darkness, and what would happen next would rewrite their destiny, and that of a legendary predator. The silence that fell over the cabin after the stepmother's car disappeared into the forest was as heavy as the cold, seeping through the wooden cracks. Inside, the two twin boys, whose names were no longer spoken by anyone, shivered. Their small bodies, weak from fever, huddled against each other, seeking non-existent warmth. Small whimpers escaped their dry lips, a tearless cry, just the sound of exhaustion and childish fear. The darkness of the night covered the meager light, and with it, hope seemed to wane. But in the shadows, something stirred. It wasn't the wind, nor dry leaves. It was a silent, almost ghostly presence that appeared at the cabin's entrance. Two eyes, so clear a blue they glowed in the darkness, fixed on the boys. Then the large form of an albino tiger emerged, its fur white as snow, with dark, almost invisible stripes. Yet its majesty was clear. Each step was careful, unhurried, just curiosity and a strange calm. The boys, in their feverish state, barely registered what it was. Their small hearts beat fast, but the expected danger did not come. The large animal approached slowly, its snout sniffing the air, sensing the smell of sickness and abandonment. Instead of attacking, it lay down on the ground, heavy yet with surprising gentleness, mere inches from the huddled bodies. Its vast white body formed a barrier against the icy wind. The warmth emanating from its dense fur enveloped the boys, a living and unexpected relief. One of the twins, the weaker one, moved unconsciously, seeking that source of warmth. His feverish little hand brushed against the tiger's soft fur, and for an instant the fever seemed to recede, replaced by a strange sense of security. The tiger merely watched, its blue eyes reflecting the meager light, an unexpected protector. The night advanced, the temperature dropped even further. Outside, the sounds of the forest were a chorus of dangers, but inside the cabin, under the tiger's guard, there was a sacred stillness. The animal did not sleep. Its blue eyes remained open, attentive to any threat to the fragile little beings. It was a behavior that defied everything known about wild predators. An anomaly of nature, a mystery. The little boys sank into a restless sleep, punctuated by weak coughs and shivers. The tiger's imposing presence, which should have been a terror, transformed into a refuge. The warmth of its body was a balm, and the slow rhythm of its breathing, a soft purr that lulled their feverish dreams. Meanwhile, miles away, the stepmother drove along the winding road, her heart light and her mind planning her new life. In her mind, the twins were a distant memory, a problem solved by cruel abandonment. She felt no remorse, only a chilling relief and the certainty of having done the necessary. Her husband's inheritance seemed to justify every act of coldness. She smiled at the rearview mirror, oblivious to the silent miracle unfolding in the cabin. In that makeshift refuge, morning began to break. The first faint rays of sun crept through the cabin's cracks. The albino tiger, which had maintained its vigil, raised its head. Its eyes swept the interior and then turned to the boys. The fever still consumed them, but the night's cold had not defeated them. They were weak but alive, warmed by the majestic animal's presence. The tiger let out a low sound, a deep purr that vibrated in the air, a murmur of contentment. It rose gracefully, its muscular body stretching, and looked towards the door. Its work was done. But fate, as the stepmother well knew, had its own plans, and dawn brought not only light, but the promise of a revelation that would change everything forever. The albino tiger, With a last, almost inaudible purr, slipped out of the cabin, its steps silent on the damp earth. It did not move far. Instead, it positioned itself a short distance away, hidden by dense foliage, its blue eyes fixed on the small wooden structure. The first rays of sun bathed the cabin's interior with a faint yellowish light, revealing the pallor of the twins' faces. They were still feverish, but the tiger's body heat had indeed warded off the night's most intense cold, and their hearts beat, though weakly, with a new and faint hope. One of them coughed softly, and the other stirred, seeking the comfort that was no longer there. Meanwhile, a few kilometers away, a team of forest rangers, led by the experienced Elias, advanced through the woods. They weren't there by chance. For days, rumors and sightings of an albino tiger, a legendary and extremely rare creature, had been circulating in the region. Elias, a middle-aged man with worry lines etched on his face and keen eyes, felt an immense responsibility to protect that magnificent animal and at the same time ensure everyone's safety. The presence of such a large and unusual predator demanded caution and investigation. Following fresh tracks and marks that seemed to belong to a feline of extraordinary proportions, the team approached the cabin area. The cold morning air carried the scent of pine and wet earth, but also a subtle, almost imperceptible odor that Elias recognized with a shiver, the smell of a large feline. He signaled his companions to stop, and they all moved with a discretion that only years in the forest could teach. Every step was calculated, every branch avoided, as the tension in the air grew. As they approached a clearing, the silhouette of the dilapidated cabin emerged among the trees. Elias raised his hand, signaling absolute silence. His eyes swept the area, searching for the animal. It was then that one of his men pointed to the cabin's entrance, with a mixture of astonishment and disbelief in his gaze. Inside, in the gloom, lay the two small, huddled bodies. The team, accustomed to the dangers of the forest, was momentarily paralyzed. Children, abandoned, and where was the tiger whose tracks had led them there? The mystery deepened when, as they advanced cautiously, Elias noticed something extraordinary. Near the cabin, semi-hidden by the vegetation, was the majestic albino tiger. Its blue, almost mesmerizing eyes observed the scene with a calm that defied its wild nature. There was no aggression, just silent vigilance. The rangers, shocked, understood. The animal was not a threat. It was protecting the boys. Elias felt a lump in his throat, a mixture of admiration and profound sadness for the little boys. With a choked voice, Elias gave the orders. 2 men were assigned to observe the tiger, ensuring it didn't feel threatened. The others, with utmost delicacy, entered the cabin. The twins' faces were pale, their lips cracked, but their chests rose and fell with weak breaths. One of the rangers, with large, gentle hands, touched one of the boys' foreheads, feeling the heat of the fever. "They're alive," he whispered, emotion overflowing in his voice. The rescue was just beginning, and the story of those boys and the tiger that saved them was about to spread, revealing a stepmother's cruelty and nature's unexpected kindness. The forest rangers moved with silent urgency, their faces marked by professionalism and deep concern. Elias, with a heavy heart, coordinated every movement with firm gestures and encouraging glances. One of the rangers, a young man named Pedro, with kind eyes and a sparse beard, knelt beside the twins. He took off his heavy coat and draped it over the small bodies, trying to offer much-needed warmth. The fever was palpable beneath his hands, but their breathing, though weak and irregular, was constant, a faint sign of life. With the utmost care, Pedro and another ranger, Marcos, an older, robust man, lifted one of the boys. Their arms were firm and experienced, yet filled with a rare tenderness, as if holding something precious and fragile. The small body was limp, the head drooped slightly, and an almost inaudible whimper escaped his dry lips. The other twin was lifted with the same delicacy, nestling against Marcos's chest. As the boys' rescue operation proceeded, the two rangers assigned to observe the tiger maintained their vigil. The majestic white animal did not move from its semi-hidden position. Its blue eyes, deep and enigmatic, followed every action of the men with impressive calm, but it remained motionless, a statue of silent protection. It was as if somehow it knew these men came to help, not to harm its protégés. Elias observed the tiger with a reverence he had never before felt for a wild animal. That was a living miracle, an inexplicable link between nature's ferocity and human innocence. He knew that the story of that tiger and the boys needed to be told, not only for justice to be served, but to inspire kindness in the most unexpected places. The boys were carefully carried out of the cabin and placed on improvised stretchers, which the rangers quickly covered with thermal blankets, essential in emergencies. The ambulance, which had already been called by radio, was on its way, but the dense forest and rugged terrain made access a challenge. Every step of the team was slow and deliberate, and with each gentle sway of the stretchers, a shiver of concern ran through the rangers' hearts. They knew that time was a silent enemy. Elias, radio in hand, began to report the situation with a voice that tried to be professional, but was choked with emotion. The news that two little boys had been found alive and that an albino tiger had protected them began to spread rapidly over the radio waves, reaching the forest ranger headquarters, and from there, the police and local journalists. Far from there, in her luxurious mansion, the stepmother, Ilara, was savoring a late breakfast, surrounded by silk and porcelain. She leafed through a fashion magazine, a satisfied smile on her lips, planning her next acquisitions. In her mind, the twins were just a distant stain in the past, a problem finally solved by the necessary decision. She felt not the slightest pang of guilt, only the euphoria of freedom and wealth. The world, for Ilara, was a stage where she was the only star, the others mere extras. The idea that her cruel action could have consequences, or that the boys could be alive, was as distant as the dilapidated cabin itself in the forest. However, fate, with its peculiar irony, was already weaving its web. The news of the rescue, though initial and full of details to be confirmed, began to pop up in small radio bulletins, like whispers that would turn into a shout. A quick mention of children found in the forest protected by a rare animal reached Ilara's ears. Distracted, she barely paid attention, thinking it was just any news. But the seed of truth had been planted. Justice, slow but relentless, began to turn its gears, driven not only by law, but by the miracle of an unexpected connection and by kindness. The forest rangers, with the boys now safe and warm, felt renewed hope blossom in their hearts. The lives of those little ones, marked by cruelty, were about to be rewritten by acts of kindness and unexpected love, showing that even in the deepest darkness, the light of altruism and resilience can shine, guiding towards a transformed future. The journey out of the forest proved as arduous as the rescue. The rangers, with their hearts in their throats, carried the improvised stretchers with delicacy, contrasting with the brute force needed to traverse the uneven terrain. Every exposed root, every stone, was an obstacle. Their small bodies, wrapped in thermal blankets, seemed even smaller and more vulnerable. Elias walked ahead, his eyes fixed on the ground, but his mind on the children. He heard the occasional whimpers and weak coughs, each sound a cruel reminder of the neglect. The fever persisted, a slow fire consuming their meager energies, and the pallor of their faces was a silent scream. Pedro and Marcos, each carrying a boy, exchanged worried glances, feeling the weight of those little lives in their arms. The albino tiger, a majestic white shadow, did not abandon them. It kept a safe distance, moving with almost supernatural grace among the trees, its blue eyes never losing sight of the group. Its protective mission had not ended, as if it needed to be sure its little ones would be safe. Elias, looking back, saw the imposing figure of the feline, a sight that filled him with awe and deep admiration. The animal was not a threat. It was a silent guardian, a living legend that had revealed itself. Its presence, a link between human cruelty and the kindness of wild nature, followed the group to the edge of the forest, where the distant sound of the ambulance siren began to echo. There, it stopped, watching them leave with a final enigmatic gaze. In the mansion, Ilara, still enveloped in her world of luxury and self-deception, he felt a slight tremor in her facade of indifference. The radio, which had previously murmured distant news, now carried a more detailed report. Children found in the forest, feverish, protected by a rare albino tiger. The announcer's voice was grave, laden with emotion. Ilara frowned. Albino tiger, children. A pang of discomfort, cold and sharp, pierced her icy heart. She tried to ignore it, attributing the coincidence to just any story, but the description, the mention of the fever, the words, dilapidated cabin, everything seemed to fit together disturbingly. Her fingers, once delicate, now gripped the porcelain cup tightly. A cold sweat began to trickle down her back. The image of the little boys, which she had tried to erase, resurfaced in her mind. No longer as a resolved burden, but as accusing ghosts. The satisfied smile on her lips vanished, replaced by an expression of growing dread. The seed of doubt, watered by fear, blossomed in her chest, a dark premonition that the world, which she believed she had shaped to her will, seemed to be starting to crumble. Meanwhile, the news of the miraculous rescue spread like wildfire. Radio waves and calls to newsrooms transformed the initial whisper into a clamor. The story of two little abandoned boys, saved by the most improbable of creatures, a majestic albino tiger, captured everyone's imagination and heart. It was a narrative that spoke of cruelty and at the same time of a kindness that transcended species barriers. People were moved, shocked by the stepmother's wickedness, but inspired by the ranger's courage and the animal's protective instinct. The image of the tiger, once a symbol of danger, now became an icon of hope and altruism. Justice, once an abstract concept, now had faces. Those of the boys, those of the rangers, and unexpectedly, that of a large white feline. Ilara's future began to be rewritten with the colors of truth, promising a transformation for everyone, where the light of resilience and human connection would shine brighter than any darkness. The journey out of the dense forest, with the little twins in the ranger's arms, was a test of strength and compassion. Every step was a battle against the uneven terrain, but Elias's and his team's determination was unwavering. The boys, wrapped in thermal blankets, seemed even more fragile, their tiny bodies trembling under the persistent fever. Pedro, carrying one of them, felt the unsettling warmth of the boy's skin through the fabric, and his heart tightened with each faint whimper. Marcos, with the other twin, murmured words of comfort, even knowing the little ones could barely hear. Their faces, once pale, were now slightly flushed with fever, and their dry lips begged for water. Finally, the clearing where the ambulance awaited came into view, a beacon of hope. The siren, once a distant sound, was now an urgent call. The medical team, already prepared, rushed to meet the rangers. With quick and coordinated movements, the boys were transferred to the ambulance stretchers. The nurse, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, touched one of the twins' foreheads and shook her head, concerned. "The fever is high, but they are strong," she said, in a tone that tried to be reassuring. Elias watched the scene, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. He knew that the worst was over for the boys, but their story was just beginning to unfold publicly. As the ambulance sped away, taking the twins to the nearest hospital, Elias turned to his men. "We need to report everything, every detail," he instructed, his voice firm. The story of the albino tiger, the unexpected guardian, would be the central piece of a cruel puzzle. The team of rangers, exhausted but with a sense of duty fulfilled, began to organize their equipment, their thoughts still on the little ones they had rescued. The miracle they witnessed in the forest would undoubtedly be a milestone in their lives. Far from there, in the opulence of her mansion, Ilara could no longer ignore the flow of news. The radio bulletins, now more frequent and detailed, spoke of abandoned twins, serious condition, and the miraculous intervention of an albino tiger. The name of the forest, the description of the cabin, everything was a cold and relentless mirror of her own cruelty. Her eyes, once filled with a triumphant gleam, were now wide with dread. The porcelain cup slipped from her trembling hands, shattering on the marble floor, a sharp sound that echoed in her mind. The hot coffee stained her silk dress, but she barely noticed. Cold sweat trickled down her forehead, and her heart beat wildly, a drum of fear and guilt. The images of the little boys, feverish and helpless, which she had tried to erase, returned with overwhelming force. She stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth in the room, her mind in a whirlwind. The freedom and wealth she so craved now seemed like a sandcastle about to crumble. The world, which she believed she had deceived, was turning against her. Public condemnation, which she so despised in others, now stalked her like an inevitable shadow. The news of the rescue, amplified by the media, was no longer a whisper but a deafening shout. Newspapers and television channels began to disseminate the story with dramatic headlines, highlighting nature's kindness against human evil. The image of the albino tiger, once a legend, was now a symbol of hope and altruism, brutally contrasting with the figure of the cruel stepmother. The story of the twins, saved by a feline miracle, touched the hearts of millions, demanding justice. Ilara, feeling the net close in, realized that her future, once so bright and secure, was now on the edge of a precipice, and the fall would be as relentless as her own cruelty. Ilara, paralyzed by dread, watched the porcelain shards and the dark coffee stains spread across the polished marble. That sharp sound, the shattering of the cup, seemed an echo of her own world crumbling. The radio's words, once distant, now resonated in her mind with terrifying clarity. Abandoned twins, serious condition, albino tiger. There was no denying it anymore. The dilapidated cabin, the remote forest, the fever, everything fit perfectly into the scene she had orchestrated with such coldness. A chill ran down her spine, and she felt the air thin in her lungs. The image of the boys' pale faces, which she had tried to erase from memory, resurfaced with cruel clarity, no longer as a burden, but as silent accusers. She brought her trembling hands to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. The luxury around her, which once comforted her, now seemed to suffocate her, an unreal setting for the nightmare unfolding. Meanwhile, in the small-town hospital, the agitation was palpable. The twins had arrived in critical condition, and a team of doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to stabilize their conditions. Their small bodies, weakened by fever and exposure, were a painful reminder of the cruelty they had suffered. Dr. Helena, an experienced pediatrician with graying hair and a look of deep compassion, examined one of the boys. Her fingers slid gently over his warm, dry skin as she murmured instructions to the nurse beside her. "They need immediate hydration and strong antibiotics," she said, her voice laden with concern. "They are too small to endure so much." The news of the miraculous rescue had already attracted media attention, and journalists crowded the hospital reception, eager for every update. The story of the Tiger Boys moved the country, and indignation against the stepmother, still unnamed publicly, grew by the minute. Back at the mansion, Ilara desperately tried to regain control. She turned on the television, seeking some distraction, but every channel seemed to be tuned to the same tragedy. Images of the cabin, the forest, and even a sketch of the majestic albino tiger filled the screen. The presenters' voices were a chorus of condemnation, and the words unspeakable cruelty, abandonment, and justice echoed in her living room. She abruptly turned off the TV, the remote control falling from her hands. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of panic. Flee? Deny? But how? The whole world seemed to know. She ran to the window, looking at the imposing gate of her property, as if expecting the inevitable, and the inevitable was not long in coming. A black car, discreet but unmistakable, stopped in front of the gate. Then a second and a third. Ilara felt a lump in her throat, her heart beating like an uncontrolled drum. 2 men and a woman, all with the serious demeanor of authority, stepped out of the vehicles. They approached the intercom, and the grave voice of one of them, amplified by the system, filled the mansion's silence. "Mrs. Ilara, we are from the police. We need to speak with you." That was the turning point. The door of her golden prison, which she thought she had built for herself, was about to be opened, not for freedom, but for justice. Ilara recoiled, stumbling over her own feet, her face contorted into a mask of terror. Her eyes, once haughty and full of disdain, now reflected only the raw fear of a cornered woman. The sandcastle of her luxurious life, built on cruelty and deceit, crumbled loudly around her, and she knew with icy certainty that there was nowhere left to run. The truth, relentless and cold as winter in the forest, had finally arrived to exact its price, and the insistent, authoritative sound of the doorbell sealed the fate of her downfall. Ilara recoiled, stumbling over her own feet, her face contorted into a mask of terror. Her eyes, once haughty and full of disdain, now reflected only the raw fear of a cornered woman. The sandcastle of her luxurious life, built on cruelty and deceit, crumbled loudly around her, and she knew, with icy certainty, that there was nowhere left to run. The truth, relentless and cold as winter in the forest, had finally arrived to exact its price, and the insistent, authoritative sound of the doorbell sealed the fate of her downfall. With trembling hands, Ilara approached the intercom, her voice a hoarse whisper. "Who is it? What do you want?" The grave voice replied without preamble. "Mrs. Ilara, we are from the forest police and the civil police. We need to come in to talk about the boys found in the forest." Ilara's heart gave a painful leap. Forest police. They knew. They knew everything. She tried to gather what little dignity she had left. "I don't know what you're talking about. My stepsons are safe." The lie sounded hollow even to her own ears. The voice from the intercom, patient but firm, replied, "Madam, we have information that indicates otherwise. It will be better to cooperate." Ilara felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The image of the boys, feverish and helpless, haunted her. She hesitated for a moment, but the inevitability of the situation forced her to act. With a heavy sigh, she pressed the button that opened the gate. The cars entered slowly, and the officers stepped out, their gazes serious and penetrating. Ilara received them at the door, trying to maintain a posture of innocence, but her anxious eyes and the hands clutching the fabric of her dress betrayed her. "How can I help you?" she asked, her voice more controlled now, but still with an almost imperceptible tremor. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Dr. Helena and her team worked with tireless dedication. The twins, though still weak, showed signs of improvement. The fever had subsided, and intravenous hydration was taking effect. One of the boys, with slightly open blue eyes, murmured an inaudible word, and Dr. Helena felt a warmth in her chest. "They are true fighters," she commented to the nurse, a gentle smile illuminating her tired face. The news of the Tiger Boy's recovery was a balm for many souls, and solidarity spread. Donations of clothes, toys, and messages of support arrived at the hospital, coming from all over the country. People, moved by the story of cruelty and miracle, wanted to be part of the redemption of those little ones. The media continued to cover the case intensely, transforming the story into a symbol of hope and the strength of human connection. The contrast between the stepmother's wickedness and the unexpected kindness of the tiger and the forest rangers was a recurring theme. Ilara's figure, though not yet publicly named, was described with growing indignation, and justice was demanded by all. Back at the mansion, Ilara felt the weight of the officers' gazes. The questions were direct, the evidence irrefutable. She tried to deny, to invent excuses, but every word she uttered seemed to disintegrate before the truth the officers already possessed. Her world of luxury and control was slipping away, replaced by a suffocating sense of helplessness. The freedom she had sought with such cruelty now transformed into a prison of guilt and shame. Ilara's downfall would be not only legal, but social and moral. A dark reminder that kindness, even if belated, always finds its way to transform and heal. Ilara felt cold sweat trickle down her temples as the officers interrogated her in the living room. The environment, once luxurious, seemed like an improvised, suffocating courtroom. Her eyes, once filled with a triumphant gleam, were fixed on the marble floor, avoiding the penetrating gazes of the police officers. The detective, with a calm but authoritative voice, said, "Mrs. Ilara, the evidence is clear. The boys were found in the cabin you described as abandoned, feverish, and dehydrated. We have witnesses who saw you in the forest that day, and the description of the cabin is unmistakable." Ilara tried to maintain her composure, but her voice failed, a hoarse whisper. I took them there so they could breathe fresh air. They were sick. They needed a quiet place. The lie was fragile, and she felt a blush rise to her face. The female police officer, with a look of disapproval, intervened, leaving two small, feverish children alone in a dilapidated cabin in the middle of a remote forest is not fresh air, madam. It is abandonment and cruelty. It is a miracle they are alive. The words struck Ilara like whips. The image of the boys, which she had tried to erase, resurfaced with overwhelming force, no longer as a burden, but as accusing ghosts. Her lips trembled uncontrollably, and a solitary tear streamed down her face, a warm trail. It wasn't remorse, but a visceral fear. Fear of loss, of condemnation, of ruin. The empire of luxury she had built on others' misfortune was crumbling, and she had nowhere to run, feeling cornered. Meanwhile, in the small-town hospital, the atmosphere was one of renewed hope and affection. The twins, though still under intensive observation, were out of danger. Their small bodies, once so fragile, now showed clear signs of recovery. Dr. Helena, with a warm smile, held one of the boy's hands, who squeezed her fingers with surprising strength. "They're going to be fine," she announced to the nurse, her voice choked with emotion. "They are little miracles, true fighters." The news of the Tiger Boy's improvement spread rapidly, and the hospital was flooded with gestures of affection. Colorful children's drawings, soft teddy bears, and handmade cards adorned the room, transforming it into a sanctuary. Families from all over the city and even from other regions sent messages of support, offering temporary homes and help of any kind. The boy's story had touched the hearts of millions, transforming the tragedy into a wave of solidarity and compassion that united everyone. Elias, the forest ranger, visited the boys daily, always with wildflowers. He watched their sleeping faces, feeling a deep connection with them, as if they were part of his own family. The image of the majestic tiger, silent and improbable guardian, was still vivid in his mind, a reminder of the power of unexpected kindness and nature's capacity to surprise. He knew that the boy's future would be rewritten by this love and resilience, a testament to their strength. The relentless media continued to disseminate every detail of the story. Newspapers carried headlines about the cruel stepmother and the tiger's miracle. Television programs dedicated hours to the case, with experts discussing the psychology of abandonment and children's incredible capacity for resilience. Ilara's identity, once protected, was now public knowledge, and social condemnation was overwhelming. Social media buzzed with messages of indignation and calls for justice, transforming Ilara's mansion, once a symbol of power, into a target for silent protests, with signs reading, "Justice for the twins, and cruelty will not be tolerated at the gates." The fortune she so coveted, and for which she had committed such an atrocity, was now under scrutiny, and her reputation irrevocably stained. The world, which she thought she had manipulated, was turning against her, demanding that she pay for her actions. Justice, slow but relentless, began to weave its web, not only in the courts, but in the court of public opinion, a reminder that truth always finds its way. The story of the boys, of their miraculous survival and the kindness that surrounded them, became a beacon of hope, showing that altruism and human connection could flourish even in the darkest circumstances, transforming pain into a new beginning. Ilara, cornered, felt the heavy air in the living room. The officer's questions became more incisive, each word a blow against her facade of coldness. The detective, with a folder full of documents, pulled out a photograph. It was the image of the dilapidated cabin, the same one she had described, with details only someone who had been there could know. "Mrs. Ilara, we found this, and we have witnesses who saw you near the cabin on the day the boys disappeared. Your description of the area, the stream, the fallen tree, everything matches." Ilara felt her face flush, and her hands, once steady, now trembled uncontrollably. She tried to look away, but the female officer's eyes were like X-rays, penetrating her soul. "No, it's not possible," she murmured, her voice almost inaudible. I was just taking a walk. I didn't see anyone." The lie was so obvious that even she felt a deep shame. The police officer sighed, a gesture of weariness and disillusionment. "Madam, the truth has a way of coming out. The boys were feverish, dehydrated, abandoned to their fate. They barely survived. What you did was an act of unspeakable cruelty." The police officer's words echoed in Ilara's mind, mixing with the muffled sound of protests outside. She could hear the shouts, the indignant voices clamoring for justice. Her mansion, once a refuge of opulence, now seemed like a cage, and she, the cornered beast. The luxury that surrounded her, the works of art, the expensive furniture, everything seemed to mock her. Suddenly, the strength that kept her standing drained away, and she collapsed onto the silk sofa, her face in her hands. Tears, not of regret, but of despair and anger at being discovered, streamed through her fingers. She had lost everything, the inheritance, her reputation, her freedom. The sandcastle she had built with such cruelty was crumbling, and she was at the center of the storm, completely alone. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the morning sunlight filtered through the windows, bringing a gentle warmth to the twins' room. Dr. Helena, with a relieved smile, watched one of the boys, who was now awake, his curious blue eyes exploring the environment. He extended a small hand towards a teddy bear that was on the edge of the crib. "Look, he's interacting," Dr. Helena whispered to the nurse, her voice choked with emotion. The other twin, though still sleeping, breathed more calmly and regularly. The fever had completely subsided, and improvement was visible with each passing hour. The room, once an environment of medical urgency, now overflowed with affection and hope. The walls were covered with colorful drawings sent by children from everywhere, and the bedside table was full of cards and flowers. The story of the Tiger Boys had become a national phenomenon. The media, which previously focused on cruelty, now highlighted the incredible wave of solidarity. Reports showed entire families mobilizing to send donations, volunteers offering to help, and hundreds of touching letters arriving daily, expressing love and support. Elias, the forest ranger, was a constant figure at the hospital. He entered the room with a bouquet of fresh wildflowers and sat beside the cribs, watching the boys with a look of deep tenderness. He felt an undeniable connection with them, a bond forged in the adversity of the forest. "They are strong, very strong," he told Dr. Helena with a proud smile. "Nature protected them, and now the world embraces them." The hospital team, exhausted but happy, felt part of something larger. Witnesses to a miracle that proved the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for overcoming adversity. The hope of a transformed future for the little twins was palpable, a new beginning that sprouted from the darkness. As the sunlight kissed the twins' sleeping faces, bringing promises of a new day, in the marble mansion, darkness deepened for Elara. Sitting on the silk sofa, with slumped shoulders and a face swollen with tears, she finally gave in. Words, once held captive by a fortress of pride and denial, gushed out in a disordered flow of despair. She confessed, not with genuine regret for the boys, but with the bitterness of someone watching their world collapse. The inheritance, the luxury, the freedom, everything for which she had sacrificed her humanity, was now irremediably lost. The officers, with serious expressions, recorded every detail, every painful confession. The detective's grave voice echoed in the room, formalizing the next steps, and Elara felt an icy chill run down her spine. The gate of her golden prison, which she herself had built, closed for good, not to protect her, but to contain her. Her eyes wandered over the expensive objects, each one a reminder of what she was about to lose. Condemnation would come not only from the law, but from the gaze of every person who knew her story, a social burden she never imagined carrying. At the hospital, Dr. Helena watched the twins with maternal affection. One of them, the more restless one, tried to reach a small, colorful toy hanging from the crib. His blue eyes, once cloudy with fever, now sparkled with childish curiosity. The nurse, with a smile, helped the boy grab the toy, and he squeezed it tightly, a small sound of contentment escaping his lips. "They are recovering impressively," Dr. Helena commented, her voice soft. "The instinct for life is powerful." Elias, who had just arrived with a new bouquet of wildflowers, agreed, his eyes fixed on the boys. He felt that those small beings, so vulnerable and now so resilient, were a symbol of the hope he and his team had helped preserve. The story of the albino tiger, the improbable guardian, was told and retold, inspiring everyone about the kindness that can emerge in the most unexpected places. The wave of solidarity continued to grow. The hospital received hundreds of letters of support, some with adoption offers, others with donations for the boys' future. One family in particular, from a neighboring town, had stood out. Donna Clara, a white-haired lady with kind eyes, a widow with a huge heart, had lost her own grandchildren in an accident years ago and felt a deep connection with the twins' story. She and her son, a kind and hard-working man, were willing to offer a home full of love and stability. The hospital social worker, who was closely following the case, had already initiated the first contacts. Feeling that this could be the family fate had reserved for the boys, the idea of a home, of a true family, of a safe future full of affection, began to materialize, dispelling the shadows of cruelty that had surrounded them. Elara, now in custody, felt the weight of humiliation. Her lawyers, once so confident in their ability to manipulate the law, now seemed small before the avalanche of evidence and public condemnation. The relentless media broadcast every update of the case, turning her into a dark example of human evil. Her image, once impeccable, was shattered, and the name Ilara became synonymous with cruelty. She found herself alone, stripped of everything she valued, facing an uncertain and bleak future. The wealth she so coveted would be confiscated, and her freedom a distant dream. Justice, which she thought she could circumvent, was finally manifesting, not only as legal punishment, but as a bitter lesson about the consequences of her actions. The contrast between her downfall and the rise of hope for the boys was a cruel reminder that kindness, even if belated, always finds its way to transform and heal, leaving evil behind. The cold light of the courtroom penetrated through the high windows, illuminating Ilara's pale face. She sat, her shoulders slumped, the image of her former haughtiness completely shattered. The judge, with a grave and measured voice, read the sentence, and each word seemed like a hammer striking the last vestige of her hope. Abandonment of a helpless person, cruelty, negligence. The accusations piled up, and with them, the public condemnation that had already turned her into a pariah. Her eyes, once fiery, now reflected only a terrifying emptiness, fixed on a distant point as if trying to escape the overwhelming reality. The inheritance she so coveted was being confiscated to cover the boys' medical expenses and to create a fund for their future, a final blow to her selfish plans. Freedom, luxury, the life she had planned, everything vanished before her eyes, replaced by an uncertain and solitary future. She clasped her hands in her lap, her nails digging into her palms, a physical pain that barely compared to the pain of humiliation and loss. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the atmosphere was one of pure celebration. The twins, now fully recovered and full of energy, played happily in the room, under the watchful eyes of Dr. Helena and Elias. One of them, the more talkative one, pointed to a drawing of an albino tiger on the wall, babbling sounds of joy. The other, quieter one, laughed with a soft toy in his hands. The social worker, with a radiant smile, sat beside the bed, talking with Donna Clara and her son Marcos. Donna Clara, with her white hair and eyes moist with emotion, held one of the boy's hands, who looked at her with surprising confidence for a child who had been through so much. "They are angels," she whispered, her voice choked. Marcos, a man with a kind demeanor and strong hands, watched the boys with evident affection, a gentle smile illuminating his face. He had already prepared a room in his house, with 2 cribs and many toys, dreaming of the little one's arrival. Dr. Helena, moved, watched the scene. "It's a miracle," she commented to Elias, who was beside her with a bouquet of wildflowers in his hands. "They found a home, a love they deserve." Elias nodded, his eyes moist. The image of the majestic albino tiger, the improbable guardian, was still vivid in his mind, a constant reminder that kindness can emerge in the most unexpected places. The hospital team, exhausted but happy, felt part of something larger, witnesses to a story that proved the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for overcoming adversity. Back in the courtroom, the judge's voice echoed one last time. "Mrs. Ilara, justice will be served. Let this be a reminder that cruelty never pays and that a child's life is an invaluable asset." Ilara felt an icy shiver. She had lost everything. At the same instant, at the hospital, Donna Clara embraced the twins, and Marcos, with a look of promise, said, "You have a new family now, a home full of love." The contrast was brutal. Ilara's downfall and the rise of hope for the boys, a climax that sealed the fate of each, showing that kindness, even if belated, always finds its way to transform and heal, leaving evil behind in a dark past. The judge's voice fell silent, but the echo of his words resonated in Ilara's mind, a cruel reminder of her new reality. She was escorted out of the courtroom, camera flashes blinding her eyes, the voices of the crowd, once distant, now a chorus of condemnation. Every step was a burden, every gaze a stab. The mansion, the luxury, the freedom, everything had vanished like smoke. Her world, built on ambition and coldness, crumbled, leaving her with nothing but emptiness and shame. She felt no remorse for the boys, but a bitter anger at being discovered, at having lost control of her own narrative. Her future was a blank canvas, painted with the colors of solitude and isolation, a dark contrast to the brilliance she had sought. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the atmosphere was one of restrained but profound joy. The twins, now dressed in new, colorful clothes donated with such affection, were ready to leave. Dr. Helena, with teary eyes, knelt to hug each of them. "Go with God, my little warriors," she whispered, her voice choked. Elias, the forest ranger, handed them 2 small teddy bears, one for each, a symbolic gift of their journey and the silent guardian who had protected them. He knelt too, and the boys, with surprising confidence, reached out their little hands to touch his face. A warm smile lit up Elias's tired face. The hospital team, who had grown deeply attached to the Tiger Boys, formed a farewell corridor, softly applauding as Donna Clara and Marcos led them out. It was a bittersweet farewell, but full of hope. Donna Clara, with a smile that radiated kindness, held one of the boys' hands, while Marcos, with the other on his lap, opened the car door. The afternoon sun kissed their faces, and a gentle breeze seemed to blow away the last clouds of sadness. The car followed a winding road towards a small country house, surrounded by a flowery garden. Upon arrival, the boys were welcomed into a home that exuded love. The room, prepared with such care, had light walls, cozy cribs, and a basket full of new toys. One of the boys, the more curious one, crawled towards a wooden toy car, while the other, quieter one, nestled into Donna Clara's lap, feeling the warmth of a maternal embrace he had never known. Marcos, observing the scene, felt his heart overflow. The arrival of those little beings filled a void he didn't know existed. Donna Clara, with a look of deep gratitude, caressed the adopted grandson's hair. That home, once silent, now echoed with childish laughter and the promise of a bright future. The twins' story, which began with cruelty and darkness, transformed into a living testament to human compassion and resilience. The albino tiger, the improbable guardian, catalyzed a miracle. The kindness of strangers wove a new tapestry of life for them. Justice, though belated, found its way. Love, the most powerful of feelings, triumphed, transforming pain into a new beginning, a home, a family. That home, once silent, now echoed with childish laughter and the promise of a bright future. In the days that followed, Donna Clara and Marcos's small country house transformed into a refuge of love and discovery. The twins, who once clung to each other for solace, began to explore the world with insatiable curiosity. The more restless one, whom Marcos affectionately named Leo, ran through the flowery garden, his small bare feet feeling the soft grass, while the quieter one, named Theo, spent hours on Donna Clara's lap, absorbing every word and affection, his blue eyes observing the world with surprising serenity. Donna Clara, with the patience of a grandmother and the wisdom of someone who had lived much, dedicated herself entirely to the boys. She told them bedtime stories, sang lullabies, and prepared their favorite foods, watching with joy every new smile, every babbled word. Marcos, in turn, taught them the names of flowers, how to play with balls, and how to build small block towers, feeling a happiness he never imagined possible. The house, once filled with the quietness of widowhood, now resonated with the vibrant energy of 2 new lives. a sweet sound that healed Donna Clara's old wounds and filled Marcos's heart with renewed purpose. The story of the Tiger Boys continued to inspire everyone. Elias, the forest ranger, visited them regularly, bringing small gifts and sharing stories of the forest, always reminding them of the majestic guardian who had protected them. Dr. Helena, who had become a family friend, followed the boys' development with maternal affection, marveling at their capacity for recovery and the joy they radiated. The community, which had united to help, continued to send messages of support and affection, proving that human kindness, once awakened, can move mountains. While the twins' lives blossomed in a garden of love and hope, Elara faced the solitude and consequences of her actions. Her mansion, once a symbol of power, was empty, her assets confiscated for the boys' fund. Public condemnation and relentless justice had stripped her of everything, leaving her with nothing but the echo of her own choices. She became a dark reminder that cruelty, however much it tries to hide, never prevails over the light of truth and compassion. The albino tiger, the improbable guardian, became a legend, a symbol of nature's unexpected kindness and a wild heart's capacity to love and protect. Its image, immortalized in children's drawings and stories told around the world, was a testament that hope can emerge in the most improbable places, defying all expectations. The twins, Leo and Theo, grew up strong and loved, their emotional scars healed by the warmth of a true family. They learned that, even in the greatest adversities, love and human connection are the most powerful remedies. Their future, once uncertain, was now a path illuminated by laughter, hugs, and the promise of days full of joy. They were living proof that overcoming adversity is possible, that justice, though belated, always finds its way, and that altruism can transform the deepest pain into a new and beautiful beginning. The story of Leo and Theo was not just about a stepmother's cruelty or a tiger's miracle. It was an ode to the resilience of the human spirit, to the strength of family, and to the heart's infinite capacity to love and forgive. It was a reminder that even in the densest shadows, the light of hope always finds a way to shine, guiding us towards a future where kindness triumphs and love builds the safest and happiest homes. The years unfolded like the pages of an enchanted book in the small country house, where Donna Clara and Marcos's love wove a refuge for Leo and Theo. Children's laughter, once a distant dream, now echoed through every room, filling the air with a melody of pure joy. Leo, the more adventurous one, transformed the garden into his own kingdom of discoveries, his agile feet running among the flowers, his fertile imagination creating stories with every leaf and every stone. Theo, with his more contemplative nature, found comfort in Donna Clara's arms, listening to her stories with bright eyes. Absorbing the wisdom and affection she showered upon him, Donna Clara, her hair now whiter but her heart younger than ever, watched the boys with overflowing gratitude. Every tight hug, every babbled grandma was a balm for the old wounds of her soul, a constant reminder that life, even after loss, can blossom anew in new and unexpected forms of love. Marcos, in turn, became the father the boys never had, teaching them to fish in the nearby stream, to build tree houses, and to dream big under the starry sky. His strong and gentle presence was the pillar of security Leo and Theo needed to grow, confident and loved. The boys' emotional scars, once deep and painful, were gradually healed by the uninterrupted warmth of that home. They learned that the world, though it could be cruel, was also capable of extraordinary kindness. The story of the albino tiger, the mysterious guardian, became a family legend, told and retold by Donna Clara before bedtime, a tale of courage and protection that reminded them of their incredible journey. Elias, the forest ranger, continued to visit them, bringing small gifts from the forest and sharing news from the sanctuary where the majestic feline lived, a living symbol of hope. Dr. Helena, now a dear friend, celebrated every milestone in the boy's development, a witness to the resilience of the human spirit. The community, which had embraced the Tiger Boys with such affection, never forgot them. Letters and small gifts still arrived, a testament to the human connection that transcends barriers and circumstances. Leo and Theo grew up knowing they were loved not only by their family, but by an entire world that rooted for them. They became young people full of compassion, always ready to extend a hand to those in need, carrying with them the lesson that kindness is the most powerful force. Meanwhile, Ilara's shadow faded in collective memory, a bitter reminder of the consequences of cruelty. Her life, stripped of luxury and freedom, was a stark contrast to the fullness and joy that filled the country house. Public condemnation and relentless justice had stripped her of everything, leaving her with nothing but the echo of her own choices. She became a dark reminder that cruelty, however much it tries to hide, never prevails over the light of truth and compassion. The albino tiger, the improbable guardian, became a legend, a symbol of nature's unexpected kindness and a wild heart's capacity to love and protect. Its image, immortalized in children's drawings and stories told around the world, was a testament that hope can emerge in the most improbable places, defying all expectations. The twins, Leo and Theo, grew up strong and loved, their emotional scars healed by the warmth of a true family. They learned that, even in the greatest adversities, love and human connection are the most powerful remedies. Their future, once uncertain, was now a path illuminated by laughter, hugs, and the promise of days full of joy. They were living proof that overcoming adversity is possible, that justice, though belated, always finds its way, and that altruism can transform the deepest pain into a new and beautiful beginning. The story of Leo and Theo was not just about a stepmother's cruelty or a tiger's miracle. It was an ode to the resilience of the human spirit, to the strength of family, and to the heart's infinite capacity to love and forgive. It was a reminder that even in the densest shadows, the light of hope always finds a way to shine, guiding us towards a future where kindness triumphs and love builds the safest and happiest homes.